Hey there, everyone. It's good to see you guys again. This video is a bit overdue, but in the past I had talked about Inzektor decks, and I showed you guys how to make the most consistent deck possible. So I went through all the steps of what I'm showing you here, and we saw that you can get really, really close to 100% consistency, where your Inzektor combos go off. You can FTK, is what this version does, but even if you don't FTK, you can Inzektor combo with extraordinary consistency. The unfortunate side effect is that this deck is extremely brittle. It falls to even a single hand trap a lot of times. So I promised you I'd show you other deck ideas, and I've been showing combo videos and some things like that, but now we can get into the nuts and bolts of how to build a deck that is still consistent, but duels a lot better and isn't quite so fragile. Before I get into specific card choices and all of that, I want to think a little bit about why Inzektors are hard to build and why they're hard to play, and what really is the nugget of the challenge that we have to solve in building this deck. And the issue with Inzektors honestly boils down to the Inzektors themselves. This deck revolves around Dragonfly. Without Dragonfly, there's not much point to play the deck. He can summon as many cards as you can think of as long as you can keep going. But the issue is that Dragonfly is a high investment card. It's at least a 2-card combo to get going. In many, many cases, you have to normal summon him to get started. And even if you do have a special summon with him, shutting down one Dragonfly effect is usually enough to stall the combo. So that makes Dragonfly himself quite brittle. You get similar issues with Centipede. If you're starting a combo with Centipede, it has the exact same problem as Dragonfly. But ultimately, everything funnels into this one card. And there are a few issues with that. First of all, you can only play 3 copies of the card, so you can't just load it up to make sure you always have it. And second, and more importantly, is Dragonfly doesn't inherently help himself. And what you get from that is that whenever Dragonfly gets stalled, your deck breaks down. But it's not just that you stopped doing stuff. It's not just that you stopped doing stuff, but that you've also made a pretty heavy commitment to try to make Dragonfly work. You've committed at least 2 cards. You've probably used your normal summon. You've narrowed your range of options in how you can play. And so to get stalled at that point is high risk, and you're playing from a disadvantaged position from that point out. So the real point here is there's a lot of pressure on Dragonfly and making Dragonfly succeed. And that's something we want to think about when we're deck building and when we're playing, is how do we relieve pressure from Dragonfly so that Dragonfly can do Inzektor things and can give us a lot of advantage, but we're not necessarily pigeonholed into Dragonfly too often and with too many of our play choices. Pressure is going to be the word I bring up a lot as we go through this, and that's going to help us think about ways to do this. So the solution to begin with that most Inzektor players all agree on at this point is we can relieve a lot of pressure off of Dragonfly by adding in the punks. Now, if you talk to a whole lot of Inzektor players, watch a whole lot of videos, you'll see a ton of different numbers of punk cards, but usually you will see at least 3. You will see 1 Foxy, 1 Xeomin, and 1 Deer Note, and then potentially other stuff besides that. And the whole point is these punks, through special summon exclusively, can go through stuff that gets you to your Inzektor combos. So there's this idea that you can commit the Dragonfly, it gets stalled out, pivot to your punks, and then you eventually end up back on Dragonfly anyways, and it works out. In this 99% version that I did, I ramped up all those punks because we can start with all kinds of different punk openings and get to Dragonfly and do our Dragonfly things. So that's really what's going to be kind of the theme of everything we're doing. We're going to figure out what cards we can cut where we aren't putting too much pressure back on Dragonfly, what cards we can add to further take pressure off of Dragonfly, and really make that the focal point of how we do our deck building. So with all of that said, we can go ahead and get into the nuts and bolts of which cards can we get rid of, why, and what does it really mean for the deck. And to get started with that, I'm going to set some goals here. This deck might be 99.9% consistent, but it's not competitive enough. I don't want a deck that's going to dip below 90% opening hand consistency. So whatever we end with, your opening hands will be able to combo at least 90% of the time, maybe higher if we can do a good job. And I have already very thoroughly draw tested and play tested all the stuff I'm going to show you. So anything we end up with will be above 90% consistency. Okay, now that we have our goals set, kind of laid some groundwork, let's talk about the current version of the deck that you know so far. In this deck, 37 out of 40 cards are devoted to opening hand consistency. These last 3 cards don't help the consistency. Now, they're useful cards, and that's why they're in here, but these 3 are placeholders. They could be anything you want. What you're going to find, my bias, I absolutely love Talents, and I love Call by the Grave. They're going to be in every version of this deck that I play. But if there's something else you prefer, throw them in. As for the second Destrudo, it adds 0 value to your opening hand consistency. Absolutely nothing. So you can drop a Destrudo very, very easily. The reason it was in this version is because it's an extra special summon, and there were rare instances where an extra special summon was necessary to do the combo. You can check the original video for that and see basically Destrudo could get you to Sprite's Brand. It was not necessary very often, but that's what it was there for. So we're going to go ahead and cut this card. I'm going to leave these 2 in, but you can think of these as placeholders. Okay. The next thing we can look at, Small World. Small World is not extremely important. Small World is just cleaning up your rare hands that don't have the ability to go off anyway. And you find you can cut all 3 of these Small Worlds, and you're going to lose between 1 and 2% consistency from your deck. So there we go. And then next up we have Allure. In my original draw testing was I did 1,000 draw tests, and I needed Allure in order to go off fewer than 10 times, for sure. Maybe fewer than 5 times. It's just not that often you need the extra draw because the rest of this deck is so solid and so consistent. So we can get rid of Allure. All right, we've already cut 5 cards. Arguably you have a couple other spots you can work with. Now let's talk a little bit more about the core of the deck. All right. Some people would say you can cut Zektrike because it's a hard once per turn. I disagree because it's just such a reliable starter and extender. I want to open this card. I like opening this card. And if I open 2 of these cards, I don't care because they work with each other, right? It's a little bit of lost hand advantage, but it's still effective and it doesn't brick. You have to open all 3 to brick, which is rare. And even then, if you open all 3, there's still a very good chance you can combo and go off. So I'm going to be leaving 3 bikes in. You can justify dropping it 2 if you want to. It's not going to make a big difference in your opening consistency. Right? As for the rest of the Inzektors, I've already trimmed the fat here. Right? We need 3 Dragonfly. We absolutely need 3 Centipede just to have enough fuel to combo. We need 1 of this type of effect. I prefer Weevil. I explained that in the last video. It's just a little more versatile. This could be Gigamantis. It would also be fine. We've already trimmed down to 1 because when we have more Weevils, more Mantas, more Excalibur, they brick, and we don't want to brick. So this is already trimmed down. One other thing, I'm going to explain why a little bit later, but I actually did cut 1 Ladybug. Now, whether or not you can cut this Ladybug, it's going to depend on which route you take when you rebuild this deck. So we're going to leave it in for now, but when it disappears later, you'll know that it was already planned. And basically the reason is there's a version of this deck where we increase our ability to extend, which is put the gas all the way to the floor. And when we do that, we can cut a Ladybug and we won't miss it. E-Telly is by far the best card in this deck. We're not cutting it. It's too good. Okay. Jam Session. This is an interesting card. So this card sometimes improves your opening hands and sometimes it bricks. Right? So you can draw a Jam Session without any punks to use it on, and that's not great. But this can draw you up to 2 cards per turn, and it gives you an extra special summon. So when you weigh it, the times it bricks versus the times it actually opens up your hand and saves a bad hand comes out pretty evenly. So whether you play this or not, your opening consistency is going to be about the same. The difference is this card duels so hard. The ability to draw puts a lot of pressure on your opponents, and it makes them want to use effects. And you would much rather they use those effects on Jam Session than pretty much any of the other stuff. But if they don't use those effects on Jam Session, such as Ash Blossom to stop you from drawing, you get to draw cards, and that's not good. Or at least that's not good for them. It's great for you. So that's really good. Also, the special summon is just invaluable. You can set up so many different plays and play through so many disruptions with this extra special summon. I absolutely love it. It's great, and because I get a search for it, Wagon is also suspiciously underrated. So Wagon is not a plain starter in this deck. Drawing Wagon doesn't mean you get to go off, but Wagon is powerful. First of all, you get the free search of Jam Session. That's always nice. Wagon's still an E-Telly target, still a tuner, still 3-star. It does all the punk stuff. It just doesn't act as a single card starter like the other punks do. The difference, though, is Wagon is a high pressure card. A lot of people forget about the second effect, but if any of your punks are targeted by an effect or for an attack, you get to draw a card. So when they do successfully stock their combos, you can leave a Wagon on the field, and it makes it harder for them to play around you on their own turn. That pressure that you're going to get to draw, it's very useful. It's gotten me out of a lot of jams. I'm a big fan of Wagon. But all of that said, when we're talking about consistency, you could arguably remove these two if you don't like the way they play, if you just feel like you need to squeeze a little more consistency out. You could replace these two cards with things that work more reliable. All right. So that doesn't leave a whole lot left. Shirakusai needs to be in the deck. Again, he's not always a great starter, but access to the fusion cleans up a lot of punk hands. If you have to normal summon Zeoman and you don't have these special summons in your hand, the only way, not the only way, but a reliable way to get what you want is to go through the fusion. There are just so many punk openings that are not full combo unless you have the fusion left. So I'm leaving it in there. If I'm going to play punks, especially I'm going to play more than 3 punk cards. Fusion fixes a lot. It's strong. It's reliable, and I highly, highly recommend playing this if you play any punks at all. All right, Deer Note, not a great starter, but it's an essential combo piece. You can't take it out. It has to be in there. Okay, so that leaves us with 3 Ogres, 3 Foxies, and 3 Zeomans. Here's what I'm going to say. Ogre gets you where you need to go, but it's not super necessary. And cutting some Ogres is going to cut fractions of a percent off of our opening consistency without breaking the deck, and it just gives us a lot more room to play harder. So what I've done, and what I recommend, is cut 2 Ogres. So we're down to 1 Ogre. It's still in there. Why do we still have 1 Ogre? Because Foxies are once per turn, and so it's nice to have the option to go into this 8 or this 8 to get a little search if we need it. It just expands our options a small amount, but you only really need 1 of them to gain access to those new options. And then lastly, we have Zeoman. You can normal summon Zeoman and go off. It works fine. Preferably, you get to bring in all the special summon and don't have to normal summon him. It's just a little stronger when you get to play that way. But seeing him is good. The problem is you don't want to see too many of him. Opening multiple Zeomans is rookie. So we're going to drop 1 Zeoman. That gives us 4 total E-Telly targets. So we know that E-Telly is always live. And we still have a ton of consistency. So we traded the chance to open any Zeoman against the chance to open too many Zeoman. And so our trade-off's still pretty close. So we're down to 32 cards. And again, these two, we'll just pull them down here to remember them. But we're actually down to 30 cards you get to work with. That gives you 10 spots to do whatever you want. And 10 spots is a lot of power. But there's a little more fat we can trim when we look at the extra deck. And so right away, when we look at the extra deck, Saryuja is actually not essential. Every combo that you do with Saryuja, you could potentially do without Saryuja. Some people forget Insect Shinobi can pull an Inzektor out of your hand or out of the graveyard. So you don't really need Saryuja's special summon effect in order to make your combos work. Now, Saryuja's effect of drawing and fixing your hands is super powerful and nice, and you can play it if you want to, but it is not essential. So we're going to pull it out as an optional flex spot. And then one other flex spot, we have Sprite Friend. Sprite Friend is absolutely necessary to fix the worst hands that you draw. The 99.9% deck does not get above about 98.5% without Sprite Friend. It's a 1.5% card. It's very good for that. All of that said, I think we have room to lose 1.5% opening in order to have more flexibility in our extra deck. So I don't currently play Sprite Friend. Whether or not you want to is just about how you want to min-max and how much flexibility you want in your extra deck. So I'll be pulling them out, but you understand why, you understand the trade-off, and you can make an informed decision from there. All right, we're going to revisit a little more in the extra deck later, but I need to walk you through some other things first. All right, we've trimmed the deck. We've made some room. Now let's talk about what you can do with it. First option is the easiest to understand. It's Yu-Gi-Oh! 101. We have 10 slots. We can fill them with generically strong cards. I have some sample ideas down here. I'm a big fan of these two. I already mentioned Tactics, Called by the Grave. Other things that you can do, hand traps are great. Ash Blossom, Imperm, Nib. These are all just generic power cards. You could also tech in some board breakers if you want. Your Lightning Storms, your Dark Ruler No Mores, you have a ton of options. You already know your staples. We don't need to go too hard and too strong into staples. Basic concept is you add 10 staple slots. With this, you're going to be able to go off a little over 90% of the time. You have disruption when you don't get to go first. You have board breakers when you don't get to go first. If they stop you, you have ways to stop them, and you're just doing a lot more back and forth dueling. And all the while, you have this heavy pressure of being able to FTK them or kill them in return. As soon as they can't stop you, the game's over anyway. So it's a nice little thing to have that pressure, especially once they know it, once they saw your combo. But we're not really reinventing Yu-Gi-Oh! By throwing a bunch of staples into a deck. You know how that works. You know what it is. And it's fine. It is a perfectly legitimate way to play. What I'm going to show you from here is not objectively better by any means. So if you like staples, play your staples. The point is, if I'm going to make a video, I want to show you stuff that maybe you haven't thought of. I want to explore new ideas. And that's what we're going to talk about for the rest of this. Is we're going to do a little bit of creativity. Some stuff you've definitely seen. Some stuff you might not have seen unless you've seen a lot of my other combo videos. I'm going to explain how it works, why it works, and how we can think about pressure. Before I go to that, I do want to make a note here. Putting staples in here does succeed in taking pressure off of Dragonfly. First of all, our Punk line already takes a lot of pressure off of Dragonfly, but when you have tactics are called by the or talents are called by the grave, you know if they try to ash you, you called by it, cool, you're good. You know, if they hit you with something, you can look at their hand and make sure they can't hit you with a second hand trap. These kinds of things do. But even more than that, if you have the ability to just duel back and forth a little bit, if they stop you, you can still stop them with your staples, and then you get another chance on your next turn. You get another draw phase, you get to do stuff with it. And so in that sense, putting 10 staples in here that are very, very strong actually does successfully relieve pressure from Dragonfly, which will increase your win rate. So that's the concept. So now that we've gone through all of that, let's get to the fun stuff. Let's look at what we can do that's non-traditional that still makes the deck duel really hard. The concept is more extenders. In theory, if we have enough extenders, if we have enough juice in the deck, no matter what hand traps they throw at us, we just keep playing and eventually we win on our own turn. And that's because we're playing an FTK. And if you look at other FTKs through Yu-Gi-Oh! History, you'll see this is a common thing. Just put the gas all the way to the floor, play as hard as you can, extend as hard as you can, and it'll boost your win rate. That principle is true. And that is what I'm going to talk to you about with this next line. Okay, so we now have a few cards we need to talk about where we can get creative and we can do things really well. Okay, so first thing we want to do is something that other Inzektor players have already figured out, right? And that is the Inferno package. We have 3 cards to talk about, and we'll get to ratios in a bit. But these 3 cards are the Inferno package, and they synergize beautifully with Inzektors. Oliver is a tuner. He can set off Inzektor effects. Durendal and Almace can both equip to any monster and then send themselves to the grave. So if you see Almace and you have Dragonfly or Centipede, you have a great hand because you can push through a lot of stuff. If you see Durendal, hand's not quite as strong. Almace is a little better as an opener, but it's still great. Durendal is still great. And just seeing Oliver in general is very strong. But there's an added bonus to this, all right? Because we're putting Oliver in the deck, we now have the ability to play a different card in our extra deck, and that's this guy right here. So before, the combo was make Beatrice, send Destroyer to the grave, bring Destroyer out of the grave with its own effect, combo that way. This is much easier. King Dempsey allows us to search Oliver's hand. It's a generic rank 4. It's easier to make than Beatrix. It's faster. It's more efficient. So now Oliver is the tuner we can always get. So when we don't see punks, we can still ultimately make Bitchwaffle. So we always have our full combo in play if we can Inzektor combo, and we're going through King Dempsey. So that makes life a little bit easier, and it makes life honestly nice. In fact, you could even drop this Destroyer if you want to. I haven't, for a reason that's going to come up in a little bit because of a specific play. So now we need to talk about ratios of these. What you're going to find most Inzektor players right now are going to play 3 Almace, 1 Durendal, 1 Oliver. I disagree. So that's not a bad ratio, but there's a reason I'm not doing it. And that comes back to this concept of pressure. These cards gain their value by comboing with Dragonfly. Yes, they also combo with Centipede, but still, Dragonfly is the focal point. These cards draw us farther away from the Punk line and push us further into the Inzektor line. So they do relieve some pressure in that you can play through Ash Blossom very easily with these cards because you just have too many effects for Ash to deal with. Ash is only going to stop one of them, and that's not good enough when you have these and a Dragonfly. You just get to go straight through it. So that's nice. That does relieve pressure. But when you bump up beyond this and you're playing 3 Almace, Almace is a hard once per turn. So is Durandal. You can't use all of these cards in the same turn to power through hand traps. And that's the drawback. That's why ultimately they add pressure to Dragonfly instead of taking it away when you bump the ratios. At this ratio, if you see any of these cards, you are taking pressure off of Dragonfly. It's when you see multiple of them that you increase that pressure because now they can't do their own effect to extend the combo. The best they can do is you equip it, and then you have to pop it with your own Dragonfly. So that makes things a little clunkier. Now, if you don't have a better plan, I would recommend going up to 3 Almace if you don't have something better to use. But fortunately for you, I've already done the homework and I found something better to use. And that's where we're going to get to our Bamboo Swords. This is my favorite part of the deck. It's different, it's fun. I don't see people using Bamboo Swords at all with anything, with Inzektors, without Inzektors. These are underutilized cards and they're fantastic. Okay, so let's talk about what they do since there's a fair chance you haven't played with them. There are more than these 3 Bamboo Swords, but these are the only 3 we care about. The first one is the original sword. You can equip it to any monster. It can then send itself to the grave to equip a different bamboo sword from the deck. Let's think about that. You equip it to Dragonfly, it sends itself to the grave, and then it equips another sword. In this case, the only viable target in the deck is Cursed Bamboo Sword. So you set off your Dragonfly, and then you equip this. And so now you have another equip on it. The Cursed Bamboo Sword does not send itself to grave. That's important to remember. But when it does go to the grave, it allows you to search any Bamboo Sword card except for Cursed Sword. So if it goes to the grave, it can search either of these 2, and we need to emphasize this point. It does not have to go to the grave after being equipped. It just has to go to the grave at all. If you ditch this for Foxy, you get a search off. If you send it to the grave with something like Beatrix, you get a search off of it. If your opponent mills it, you get a search off of it. It doesn't matter. If you equip it to Xiamen and then you sync him off, you get this search. So this card, this search effect is incredibly reliable. You can pretty much always set it up. The only time you're unhappy to see this is if you draw all spells and none of those spells are here. So this search, super reliable. This search sets up and you're setting off Inzektor effects very, very easily. These have other effects we're going to come back to, but the third card here is not an equip. This instead is a Golden Bamboo Sword. If you control a Bamboo Sword, that means it has to be equipped to something, then you can draw 2 cards. So now we have Pot of Greed in the deck. I don't think I need to sell you on Pot of Greed. Here it is. Now, you might worry that we can't do this consistently enough to play the Golden Bamboo Sword, but I'll address that in a minute. Let's go ahead and come back and let's look at the other effects that these have because they are worthwhile. Next up, we have if the monster this is equipped to attacks directly, you Regeki your opponent's field. Hopefully you can read this on the thing. So you now have a Regeki effect that you can search very reliably out of the deck. And on top of that, Inzektors are really good at attacking directly because they have this guy, Inzektor Hopper. You can set this up, do your Hopper, and you can attack directly and Regeki. Now, this isn't something that's going to come up game after game after game. It's not going to come up all the time because you have to be comboing a little bit to use it in the first place. But I've play tested this deck a lot, and I have used it, and it's fantastic, and it's a little bit hilarious because people aren't ready for it. Also, Cursed Bamboo Sword can set up original Bamboo Sword. That's because this other effect is that you can bounce an equipped Bamboo Sword to make the monster this is equipped to attack directly. So, easy example, both of these are equipped to a monster. You activate this, bounce the original Bamboo Sword, now your monster can attack directly this turn. So then, you just re-equip the original Bamboo Sword because none of these are once per turn. These are hard once per turn, your Infernoble cards. Bamboo Swords are not. If you play 3 of each of these, you can use every single effect in one turn, in one combo series, straight. Okay, and that's why these are so strong, because you can just equip it again. You just equip it again. But finishing off this effect, this sets up your Inzektor. So you bounce it, put it back on, and now it can attack directly, all on its own. You don't even need Hop for that, and you can Inzektor. And what I'm going to show you in a little bit is an extra deck monster that allows you to do this kind of easily, and it's almost scary. Okay, so we have our bamboo swords, and now we have a question: how many should we play? We could conceivably play 3 of each of these, but 9 bamboo swords is a lot of bamboo swords, and I have tried it because it was a lot of fun, but it clogs. Basically, we only want 1 golden bamboo sword. As great as it is to draw 2 cards, the ratio of drawing 4 to bricking, because you have 2 of these in your hand that you can't set up, is not favorable. So I'm only playing 1 because this deck is consistent enough. If you draw this, you can eat that loss of a card because there's still other things you can do. You can just ditch this with Foxy. You can set it to pop the Hornet if you need to. Maybe you can get into your bamboo swords. Maybe you'll draw into them with your jam session. I've definitely done that. So 1 we can handle. You draw 2 of these that you can't set off, and now you have a backhand. So we're limiting that possibility. As for these, I found the best success is 2 of each is really, really good. 2 of each of these, and you have very long combos, you're very reliable combos, and you're just not overdrawing them very often. But that said, if you have 2 of each of these, and you can draw 5 bamboo swords, and that is a dead hand. And sometimes you can draw too many bamboo swords in general, which isn't great. So if you want to pare down from there, it is better to have 2 cursed sword than it is to have 2 original sword. And that's because if you have a cursed sword, you can search an original sword, always, right? You can equip it to a monster, you can ditch it for an effect. There's almost always a way to get the cursed bamboo sword to the grave in order to get back to the original. So you just have those freedoms. So you can play these 3, you can bump up to have 2 of this, so 4 total. You can also bump this to have 5 total. All of those are viable, all of those work. None is objectively better than the others, you're just making trade-offs. Personally, I'm only playing 1 of each, and there's a good reason for that. So now we get to my favorite part of this deck, but also arguably the weakest thing I'm going to suggest to you today. And that is the Power Tool Braver Dragon. So I am going to link this full combo in the video so you can appreciate it. But let's talk about what this does. This is a generic 9-star synchro monster. For anybody who's not seeing this already, this is extremely easy to make. Any punk tuner, and then any 3-star Inzektor equipped with a 3-star Inzektor is exactly 9-star. That's super easy to do. There are plenty of other ways to make it too, but the point is you can get to 9 easily. There's the linked video has this really cool Destrudo thing that sets it up. It's fantastic. I love it. Here's the point of Power Tool Braver. If he is special summoned, then you can get 3 different equips out of your deck and or graveyard and equip it to him. So this means any of your 4 equips that you're doing here, any combination of them can go. And even if you had to already use them to set them up, you can get them out of the grave. So they're still alive. And what happens, you get them out, and the 3 you really, really want to equip are Original Bamboo Sword, Cursed Bamboo Sword, and Durendal. You could do All Mace, but you're kind of blowing an effect you don't need to. So Durendal is arguably better. You're going to equip them to him. First off, you want to set off your Durendal to search Oliver, assuming you don't already have Oliver. That's why we're doing it this way. So you go ahead and do that, and then you have Oliver in hand, and you still have these 2 equipped. Then he has a second effect. You can send 1 equip to the graveyard in order to trigger this effect, and this effect either changes the battle position of 1 monster or negates the effects of 1 monster for the turn. If you're doing turn 0, just change his own battle position, no big deal. If you're going where they have a monster, you can turn off one of the monster effects as part of this combo, and it's super cool. But the big thing here is he's going to send Cursed Bamboo Sword to the grave to do this effect. When you do that, you get to search Golden Bamboo Sword. How nice is that? And you already have Original Bamboo Sword equipped. So now you get to draw 2. And the reason you did Durendal first was just to send the deck a little more, so your draw 2 is that much stronger. Now we're in really good shape. But we still have an equipped card attached to Power Tool Braver Dragon, and we have an Oliver in hand, which means we can special summon our Oliver. And when we do, we now have a total of 10 stars on the field. That means we get a free Baron off of this play that let us get multiple cards out of the deck and draw 2. And then after all of that, most of the time when you make them, you can still FTK, and it's now protected by a Baron. So the reason I love this power tool setup is when you have the cards for this, you don't have the cards for this 100% of the time. This is an extra thing that allows you to play through stuff. They have to disrupt this combo, or else you get to draw 2 cards, search a bunch, make a Baron, and then FTK with the Baron protecting. It's too much. Rarely will any deck be able to survive this combo if they don't stop it. But the cool thing is, because we have multiple ways to get to our stuff, a lot of times when you're making Braver Dragon, you have a backup line that once they interrupt the Braver combo, now you've taken the hand traps out, and now you have a free path. You can just do the rest of your combo with whatever line you have. As an example, you can open an Inzektor line, go to Braver, they stop it, and then you throw off your E-Telly and just FTK them for their troubles because you can just go through the punk line. There are examples linked in the description, lots of videos. I've done enough combos that you can get the idea, and you can have a ton of fun exploring more of this. So at this point, we've figured out a whole bunch of different ways to do things. We're up to 36 cards, and now we need to talk about a little bit more optimization. And we're going to come back to the extra deck for that. So up to this point, I had showed you that we can take out Saryuja, and we can take out Beatrice and replace it with King Dempsey. Then we still had a flex spot, but I'm only at 13. That's because what I skipped showing you is the last card I took out of the extra deck, and that is Armorhorn. Now, this is pure blasphemy for anybody who's been playing Inzektors for a while. Armorhorn was the thing that made us all think Inzektors could be viable again. But here's the crazy part. We now have so many extenders in this deck that we can subtract Armorhorn and we won't miss them. I took Armorhorn out of my deck when Diablo Mantis became legal. And I have never once wished that Armorhorn was in this deck. Not a single time did I stall out because I didn't have Armorhorn. And that's because I just have too many other ways to get to my combos. I can skip Armorhorn. Now, why are we taking Armorhorn out? Specifically because Armorhorn is the dangerous choke point in the deck. You set up your Armorhorn and you need its effect for that second normal summon, and if they negate that, you're dead in the water. It's a terrible place to be. Now, arguably, you could see similar things happen with Pico. The difference is this deck can play without Armorhorn. Pico is still absolutely necessary. You need to be able to recycle Inzektors because you'll run out sometimes, and the Pico equip from deck it's the explosive play that makes Inzektors work so well. Another potential dangerous choke is Bishbalking. If you're going down a Bishbalking line and then they impermeable Bishbalking, that's not great. That stalls your combo, right? Unless you have a special summon in your hand to keep going, you're done there. The difference is, if all you have on your field is Bishbalking, that's at least a good card. If all you have on your field is an Armorhorn and you're stalled out, you're in a tough spot. Bishbalking is an immortal monster that you can use on your opponent's turn to beef them up to multiple thousands of attacks. So at least they have to expend cards to get around them. Armorhorn is extremely easy to take down and not a problem at all. So that's the justification, is we don't need Armorhorn to combo anymore. These equips get us there easily. And then on the rare chance we only get to open Dragonfly, Ladybug, because our hand just isn't that strong, we actually still don't need Armorhorn because we just go get Zektrike and we do our combo that way. It's not optimal. It's always nice to be able to hold Zektrike, but since that's a minority of the ways you're going to be doing these combos, and because these give you so much extra fuel, Armorhorn is a liability more often than it is helping the deck. And more importantly, when we get rid of Armorhorn, we get more room in the deck. So we have room for 2 more extra deck monsters. You've got a lot of choices. One thing that I think a lot of people who have played Oliver will agree with me on is to throw a Flight in. Super easy. Him with any of your 3-star Inzektors, boom, bang, you've got an Arclight, great card. One little warning, you got to remember your combos don't work while Arclight is on the field, so plan accordingly. But there's still just tons of good times to make this card. It's super strong. You can protect FTKs with it, or if you get stalled out and you can't FTK, it's a great dueling card, right? Because you can, you already know what it does, right? They can't use hand traps. Well, at least they can't use monster hand traps. There's so many things they can't do, and you can negate any one effect with it. So, super powerful. Last card that I'm using is familiar to most Inzektor players, and that's Paradise. And Paradise, just in case you don't know, you roll dice, and if it comes out in your favor, then you negate, then your you don't negate. Actually, your opponent cannot activate monster effects at all for a full turn. If it backfires, you can't activate monster effects at all, but Paradise also loads the deck, or loads the dice. And other people have done the math, and I'm taking the word for it, but he's right around 92% of the time he works out in your favor. And then another 5% of the time it's a tie, so there is no effect. And about 3% of the time is when you lose with this effect. So you're in great shape. Every once in a while it's going to backfire if you use it a lot. You have to decide if that's worth it to you or not. But here's the thing about Paradise. He turns off all monster effects. There are a lot of times you can take an Inzektor line, get to Paradise, and then turn off all their hand traps, throw off your e-telly, and then kill them. Right? So this protects a lot of your stuff. Also, if you get stuck somewhere along your combo, a lot of times you can bail out into Paradise and you still have a good floodgate that keeps your opponent under control and you get another turn. There are also going to be times when you go second and you can make him and you can turn off all their effects and then you can do stuff. It just kind of depends on what kind of board you're up against. The point is, very versatile card, extremely powerful card, does not detract from your FTK, and just beefs up your a lot. So these are the changes I've been playing with. Arguably, you could take out the Braver Dragon, in which case I would muff up these cards. I would highly recommend you keep King Dempsey if you're playing Oliver. I see no reason to just limit yourself and not be able to get him whenever you want. All right, and now we have 4 cards left in my lane. I've already mentioned Call by the Grave, and I've already mentioned Talents. They're super good. They protect you on both turns. They duel really hard. Next up, we have Thrust. Do I need to sell Thrust to you? It's arguably the strongest card in the game. Lets you search a lot of stuff. Aside from these two, Thrust can search your Golden Bamboo Sword, which is pretty cool. It can search your Zektrek. It can search your Foolish Burial. And let me remind you, this is a Bish Balkan deck, which means if they use a monster effect, say an Ash Blossom, and you can still combo, eventually you're going to put monsters on their side of the field, and that allows you to use your Thrust on your own turn 0. Yeah, I paused so you could really think about that. One thing that's happened to me a few times before is I have the lineup, and it's one of those hands where I needed the Spren, and I don't have the Spren, but I have Tasking, and I have Thrust. And so I go down my line, I play through the Ash Blossom, I get where I need to go, I throw off the Thrust, and then I get the Foolish, and I don't need Spren, right? So I just get to finish them off right then and there. Super strong, obviously very versatile. And then because we're playing Thrust, the last superpowered card that I am personally playing is Evenly. Obviously, there are arguments for a lot of different cards right here. The reason I like Evenly is specific to the fact that we're playing FTK. So we go second. Opponent puts up a really nasty board. Our only hope to break it is Evenly. So we sacrifice our battle phase, throw off Evenly, break their board, and then we try to combo on main phase 2. Most decks are unhappy here because they can't attack. We don't care. We're still going to kill them on that one turn because it's an FTK and Evenly doesn't get in the way of that. But arguably, you could turn this into a Dark Ruler and not worry about the FTK. You could turn it into a whole bunch of other things that are all very strong and worth considering. I just like Evenly because I think there's a good synergy here. I like that I can search it. If you only have one power card, arguably Evenly is a good one to pick. All right, so that is our deck. This is what I've been playing, and I've been having a ton of success with it. I'm over a 75% win rate in TCG with it right now. Now, I haven't been going to major tournaments, and I'll leave that to you guys. I've explained in other videos that I just don't travel for tournaments anymore. But I've had success against all the meta decks right now. Some of them are harder than others. We all know that. But it's versatile. It's fun. I have so many options when I'm playing. I love doing it. And I'm glad I get to share it with you guys so you can play with it, explore. You'll come up with your own ideas that are really cool, and maybe you guys contribute ways to make it even better. But I want to end with a last little bit of thought, and that's going to come back to the Braver Dragon. The Braver Dragon is why I'm only playing 3 of the Bamboo Swords, because I have a lot of ways to make this, which means I have a lot of access to these cards. If you don't like the Braver Dragon, if it doesn't feel good, and you take it out, that is fun. The deck will not suffer for it, okay? But if you do that, then what I'm going to recommend you do is drop both of these, seriously, and replace them with one of each of these. And the reason for that is with King Dempsey, Oliver is still in play. But the bamboo combos are stronger, more resilient, more reliable, and keep going better than these do. And without this utility, without the Braver Dragon utility, I am firmly convinced the 2 of each of these is better than 1 of each of all 4 of these. That's my 2 cents. You guys test it yourselves, see what you like. But that is the deck. That's what I'm playing right now. I'll keep you guys updated with new ideas that come up down the road. For a little while, I'll probably be trying to do some weird deck ideas and learn a little less about competition. But, there'll be a lot to explore, and I'll keep you posted as I see more stuff. Thanks a lot, and I'll catch you next time.